Good
We are
evening.
live.
Good evening and welcome to the November 14th, 2022 Rental Housing Committee meeting. This meeting will be conducted in accordance with California Government Code 54953E as authorized by resolution of the Rental Housing Committee. Please contact mvrent at mountainview.gov to obtain a copy of the applicable resolution. Members of the Rental Housing Committee will participate in the meeting by video conference with no physical meeting location. Members of the public wishing to observe the meeting live may do so at mountainview.legstar.com, on YouTube at mountainview.gov/YouTube, and on Comcast Channel 26. As noted on the meeting agenda, members of the public may provide oral public comments during the public comment period for an item by signing up at mountainview.gov/meeting and entering webinar ID 937-7306-8363, or by phone by dialing 669-900-9128. and entering webinar ID 937-7306-8363. Any emails received by 5 p.m. today were forwarded to the Rental Housing Committee. Emails received after 5 p.m. will not be read during the meeting, but will be entered into the record for the meeting. The meeting is called to order at 7:04 p.m. I will now proceed with roll call with Andrea or Patricia or Jessica's help.
Thank you. All right, we will start with a committee member Grunwald,
Here.
committee member Rosas,
Here.
committee member Almond,
Here.
committee member Pardo Dizella is not present at this time. Vice Chair Rosas, Vice Chair Ramos,
Here.
and Chair Haynes Livesay.
Present.
Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. We will now move to agenda item 3, which is the consent calendar. These items will be approved by one motion unless any member of the committee wishes to remove an item for discussion. The purpose of the consent calendar is for the committee to efficiently and quickly consider routine or administrative business items with one motion. Although committee members may remove items, it is generally not intended for the committee to have a lengthy, substantive discussion on the consent calendar items. Would any member of the committee like to pull an item? Okie dokie, I'm not seeing any hands. So would any member of the public on the line like to provide any comments on the consent calendar item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Okie dokie, I'm not seeing any hands there either. Okay. The motion to approve the consent calendar should include only those items that were not pulled for discussion, which is all 3 of them on your screen. I will now bring the item back to committee action. And the motion to approve should include reading the titles of the agenda items on your screen or the resolutions attached. No action is required for agenda item 3.3, the quarterly financial expenditures fiscal year 2022-23 through September 30, 2022. Do I have a motion or discussion?
I will move to approve the minutes of the RHC meeting October 17, 2022. 3.2 is to adopt a resolution to continue virtual meetings pursuant to Brown Act provisions as amended by AB 361. And 3.3 is quarterly financial expenditures fiscal year 2022 to 23 through September 30th, 2022.
I'll second that.
And now we shall have a vote.
All righty, so it looks like committee member Pardo DeZella has not joined us yet, so I'll go ahead and start with committee member Grunwald,
Aye.
committee member Rosas,
Aye.
committee member Almond,
Aye.
Vice Chair Ramos,
Aye.
Chair Haynes Livesey.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you, Andrea. Okay. We will now open the meeting for oral communications from the public. This portion of the meeting is reserved for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are allowed to speak on any topic for up to 3 minutes during this section. State law prohibits the committee from acting on non-agenda items. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on the non-agenda items? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. I see one hand. Let's bring Teresa to a speaker.
Sorry, one second. My captions are in the way of my controls.
No worries.
All right, Teresa, I believe you can unmute yourself.
Yes, hi, everybody. First, I just wanted to say thank you to Anki and the staff and the RHC for getting back to me on the unit registration software. Anki, we are looking at that internally, and I just wanted to say thank you. It looks like we're making progress. I really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Teresa. Do we have any other hands? Looking like no. So we will now move to agenda item 5.1, which is the appeal of decision regarding petition 21220016. Now, the Rental Housing Committee, in hearing this appeal, is acting in a quasi-judicial fashion and will conduct the hearing in accordance with those standards. This hearing is being held pursuant to Section 1711J of the CSFRA and Chapter 5, Section H of the regulations adopted by the RHC. In accordance with Section 1711 of the CSFRA, any party to a petition who disagrees with the hearing officer's decision may appeal to the full RHC for review. In this case, the tenant filed for a downward adjustment of rent and the property owner submitted an appeal. Accordingly, the property owner is referred to as the appellant and will present first. The hearing will be conducted in accordance with the procedures as set forth in Chapter 5 of the regulations. The RHC will first take comments from any member of the public who is not a party to the petition who wishes to speak on this matter. Comments are limited to 3 minutes. Staff will then provide a report to the RHC regarding the appeal and tentative appeal decision. Next, the appellant landlord will be given 10 minutes uninterrupted to make a presentation and arguments. After the appellant landlord has completed their presentation, the respondent tenant will be given 10 minutes uninterrupted to make a presentation and arguments. If there is more than one petitioner that wishes to address the RHC, the petitioners collectively must determine how to allocate their 10 minutes amongst themselves. Upon conclusion of both presentations, each party will be given up to 5 minutes for a rebuttal, with the appellant landlord presenting the rebuttal first. Upon conclusion of the party's rebuttal, the RHC members will be given a chance to ask questions of staff first, and then of the appellant and the respondent. The RHC will then deliberate and make its decision. During deliberations, it is likely that the RHC members will have additional questions for staff. Additional questions for the appellant and the respondent will generally not be allowed. RHC members are required to disclose any communications that they have had with any of the parties to the petition or the parties' representatives and the substance of those communications since the date that the petition was filed. The decision of the RHC is to be based on the record presented to the hearing officer. Information disclosed to an RHC member that is not part of the record is not to be considered in the hearing. Now, do any RHC members have ex parte communications that need to be disclosed? Okay. Seeing none, we will now proceed with the hearing. Are there any members of the public who are not parties of the petition who would like to speak? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. The speech timer will be displayed on the screen, and you will each be given 3 minutes to speak. Okay, I am seeing none. So the staff now has a presentation regarding the appeal and tentative appeal decision.
Thank you. So the purpose of this item is to review the tentative appeal decision, and the RHC may either accept the tentative appeal decision or modify the tentative appeal decision with instructions to staff citing appropriate evidence in the record to support the modification. So the role of the RHC is to review the record as it stands. De novo review is not recommended in this instance. And the only thing that the RHC is reviewing is the decision of the hearing officer, the parts of that which were appealed by the, in this case, the appellant landlord. I think the chair has already given a schedule for the appeal hearing, so I will not review that again. And we can go on to the next slide. I think so. The RHC must determine whether or not each appealed element of the hearing decision is supported by substantial evidence. You are not reweighing the evidence or relitigating the issues. The appeal, as I mentioned, is based on the records submitted to the hearing officer. There's no new evidence that can be taken or requested unless the RHC decides to proceed with a de novo review, which in this case staff recommends against. The RHC does not, however, have to come to the same conclusions as the hearing officer, despite reviewing the same evidence. Next slide. Sorry, next slide, please. Okay. So as I mentioned, staff does not recommend a de novo review. That would require a new formal hearing, which would require significant time to prepare. The existing evidence in the record is sufficient, and the existing record demonstrates adequate review and ample opportunities for the parties to present relevant evidence. And in particular, in this case, de novo review does not make sense because the issues raised in the appeal relate to the application of the law. Nobody is really contesting the facts, the underlying facts or the evidence that were submitted. So the petition defines the scope of the hearing decision, whereas the appeals of hearing decisions limits the scope of the RHC's review of the appeal. So again, the RHC's review is limited to the elements of the hearing officer's decision that were appealed by the landlord. The RHC can affirm the decision of the hearing officer, can modify that decision, or can remand the decision for additional evidence to be collected and reconsideration. Once if there's a remand, then it would go back to the hearing officer, and an additional hearing would take place. If the RHC chooses to affirm or modify the tentative appeal decision, then that will become the final decision of the rental housing committee, and thereafter may be subject to an appeal up to the Superior Court. I believe the chair already went over this, but staff will complete their presentation of the tentative appeal decision. The appellant and the respondent will then each have 10 minutes to make their presentations. The appellant and the respondent will then have 5 minutes each for rebuttal. And then the RHC will have opportunities to ask questions of staff, the appellant, or the respondent, and thereafter the RHC deliberates and makes a decision as to whether to accept the tentative appeal decision, modify it, or if necessary, remand. So this was a petition filed for downward adjustment of rent on the basis of unlawful rent related to rent concessions provided during the initial term of the tenancy. Specifically, the tenant alleged that the annual general adjustments for 2021 and 2022 were imposed on the incorrect base rent, and that base rent did not take into consideration a 1 month concession that was provided in the second month of the initial term of the tenancy. Slide. So this is just a breakdown of the procedural summary. I don't know that we need to go through this in detail. So the hearing officer's decision concluded that the tenant was entitled to a downward adjustment of rent due to unlawful rent increases. The hearing officer calculated that accounting for the 1 month concession, the correct base rent was $1,416.25. And additionally, that the tenant was entitled to a refund of any overpaid rent due to the unlawful rent increases. The landlord raises one issue on appeal, namely that the hearing officer erroneously applied CSFRA Regulation Chapter 2, Section B2I, to the petition because the Rental Housing Committee intended those regulations to go into effect on September 1st, 2022, and therefore should not be applicable to rent concessions that were provided prior to that date. So to cover, if you all will remember, the regulations that are being challenged as inapplicable to this petition are the rent concession regulations that were adopted back in July, sorry. So just to review, those regulations apply to all tenancies commencing after October 19th, 2015. And they provide that if a temporary rent concession is provided by the landlord during the initial term of the tenancy, then the initial rental rate or the base rent shall be the average amount of rent actually demanded to be paid and paid by the tenant during the initial term of the tenancy. The definition of rent concession includes, but is not limited to, 1 or more months free rent, except as specified, or a dollar or percentage amount reduction of the rent provided over the course of the initial term of the tenancy. Next slide. So CSFRA Regulations Chapter 2, Section B2, the Roman numeral 2, provides that an exclusion from the rent concessions definition, and therefore the calculation of base rent, is where the first month's free or discount, where free rent or discounted rent is provided in the first month of the initial term of the tenancy, with the first full month meaning, the first month meaning the first full month following the start of the rental agreement. And sorry, the initial term of the tenancy refers to either the initial term as agreed upon by the landlord and tenant in the rental agreement, or if the agreement is month to month or longer than 12 months, the initial term shall mean 12 months. And where the first month's rent is free, the initial term of the tenancy, when calculating the base rent, shall be reduced by 1 month in calculating the base rent. Next slide. So in conjunction with the clarifications to the base rent definition for tenancies commencing after October 19th, 2015 in Chapter 2 of the CSFRA regulations, the RHC also adopted CSFRA regulations Chapter 4, Section G6, which places limitations on unlawful rent petitions on the basis of rent concessions. Specifically provides that for rent concessions that were provided for a tenancy that commenced before September 1st, 2022, a tenant would only be entitled to a rollback to the base rent and a refund of the rent that was overpaid within 1 year prior to the date of the filing of the petition. For rent concessions provided for a tenancy that commenced on or after September 1st, the tenants would be entitled to a rollback to the base rent and a refund of any rent that was overpaid, subject to applicable statutes of limitations and state law. Next slide. So the tentative appeal decision would uphold the hearing officer's decision. The hearing officer did not err in applying the rent concession regulations because the regulations covered rent concessions provided prior to September 1, 2022, including the ones in the petition. They just limited the amount of recovery that the tenant could get of overpaid rent for those rent concessions provided prior to September 1, 2022. And additionally, the rent concession regulations did not change the calculation of base rent. They merely provided guidance about how base rent has been and should be calculated when concessions were offered. Therefore, there's no issues regarding retroactivity. Next slide. So the recommendation from staff is to consider the tentative appeal decision and either accept the tentative appeal decision or modify the tentative appeal decision with instructions to staff citing appropriate evidence in the record. Thanks.
Thank you, Naz. That was wonderful. Our appellant landlord, would you please click your raise hand button in Zoom if you would like to speak, and staff will temporarily promote you to a panelist. The speech timer will be displayed on the screen and you will have 10 minutes. Also, please do not use the chat function in Zoom, anyone, to provide any information. I saw a hand and then it disappeared.
He should be promoted. And that's
Oh.
why. There he is.
Hello. Can you hear me?
Yes.
We can hear you now.
Can you see me?
We can.
Okay. Thank you for your time tonight. I received the tentative decision and I'm a little confused at why the decision indicated that my assumptions were invalid and an error, and the assumptions that were made by whoever wrote the tentative decisions assumptions were apparently valid and not an error. And specifically, again, my appeal is the effective date of your amendment. And the tentative decision says that I was correct and that the committee discussed the September 1st, 2022 date at the July 18th, 2022 meeting. However, the committee did so in the context of how concessions provided before or after the date would be treated for the purpose of downward adjustment of rent petitions. I can say that none of those words or any of the words listed below in the paragraphs in the decision were ever brought up at the July 18th meeting or ever discussed. What was discussed, and I'm going to hold a sign up or a slide up here. I can't see myself. Do you guys see this?
We can see that you're holding something, but it's very blurry.
Okay, this is I don't know how to make it seem, but this is a slide that was presented by staff that says talks about the notice of rent concession, and the bottom bullet point says the purpose of the notice is to ensure both landlords and tenants understand the concession and its impact on the base rent. The staff member that read just prior to my time is the person who presented this. She also verbally read the exact same thing. Numerous people in the public comment section of that meeting asked for clarification on when this amendment was going to be effective, and it was never clearly discussed. So the only date that was discussed is September 1st. One can only make the assumption, because that's all we could do, that the effective date is September 1st, 2022. With regard to the calculation of the base rent, the tenant was charged the lease amount, $15.45, every month of the initial term. It just so happens that one of those months, the landlord, myself, paid for that rent. No different than the state of California, Bill Wilson, Community Service paying that rent. That rent was paid. Essentially, what has happened with passing this amendment is the morning of July 18th, I was fully compliant with the CSFRA. The rent increase that was provided was compliant and legal. And then that evening, this amendment was passed. And for some reason, landlords were penalized in this case for providing rent assistance. Nobody else was penalized. Community Service, Bill Wilson, State of California, they can continue to provide rental assistance, but apparently the landlord can't. By passing this and making it retroactive, the ramifications to the landlord are it's a penalty, and I can't go back in time and change the decisions I made 2-3 years ago to correct or to make myself, compliant then. Basically, this decision to make it retroactive is tantamount to the city taking a parking spot that was legal to park in and then deciding a year later that it's illegal to park there and going back and giving tickets to those people who park there. That's exactly a perfect analogy to what's happening here. I have no control. I can't go back in time and change it. I bring this up a lot when I talk to my kids. Do things pass the common sense test? And during this whole meeting and watching it 2 or 3 times and hearing the date, September 1st, 2022, seeing the slide that says the purpose is to ensure both landlords and tenants understand the concession and its impact on base rent. Does it pass the common sense test that this is retroactive? Absolutely not. The only thing that passes the common sense test is that it's effective in the future, because now the landlord and the tenant know how this is going to impact them, and the landlord can make the decision to give concessions that this amendment has handcuffed or limited, landlord's ability to provide rental assistance. I bring up Community Service and Bill Wilson and the state of California. The way that the amendment and the original CSFRA is written, those tenants that didn't pay rent for 2 years through the pandemic and the state of California paid their rent, does that mean their base rent is zero? Are we going to get petitions saying, hey, my base rent is zero? If you put your blinders on and apply what is written, that's exactly what somebody could argue. The Rental Housing Commission, the committee members, they have a job that I wouldn't want. They're human, and the people they rely on, the staff members, are human. They can't foresee every possible outcome, every shortcoming. But in this case, I believe it is a shortcoming that this is being applied retroactively. There's no chance for for a landlord to make a decision on how they want to run their business, they can't go back in time. I think in this case, Rental Housing Commission and the staff need to, review this and make it effective September 1st, 2022. I'll live with it, but at least now I know what I'm living with. By making it retroactive, I go back to the parking spot analogy. So I ask that you consider making this effective after September 1st. It's the only thing that makes sense. That's how it was discussed, and it wasn't clear in the meeting, but that's the only thing that makes sense. So that's all I have.
Very much, Steve. And now we will hear from our respondent tenant. If our respondent tenant would please click the raise hand button in Zoom if you would like to speak, and the staff will temporarily promote you to a panelist. The speech timer will be displayed on the screen and you will have 10 minutes. Again, for everyone, please do not use the chat function in Zoom to provide information.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can hear you.
Okay, great. Sorry, it's dark where I am. Well, hi, thanks for hearing this decision or case, whatever you call it. I don't have much to say because I would sort of be repeating some of what was written in the hearing decision and then the tentative decision. But I'll just maybe reiterate that so as was mentioned before, I moved in on May 1st, 2021, and I was paying $15.45 a month in rent. The second month for me was free, so I did not pay rent for June of 2021, and then when it was time to renew, there was a question on my end about what my base rent should be. My understanding is that that base rent was always something that was in effect as what tenants paid during the first 12 months of tenancy. The question was just specifically about rental concessions, but it was always the case that, base rent was what was paid in the 12 months. And that's my understanding of what it was. So when it was time to renew, I had originally submitted this petition because I paid $15.45 over times 11 over 12 months instead of $15.45 times 12 over 12 months. And then my understanding of the September 1st, the September 1st decision, I thought was just about when maybe there were two, but when the AGA, the annual general adjustment, was going to increase to 5%. I wasn't aware of any other, what else September 1st could mean. But my understanding is, I think that maybe the concern here is sort of outside of the scope of this particular case. It's sort of no surprise that I feel that the tentative decision should stand in this case, and then landlords can make decisions about what they want to do for their future tenants. I would have paid rent. I mean, I've paid rent every single month. I would have gotten my 1 month free during the first month, but that's not how it was. It was the second month. And so, I think that I'm just, I'm following the, I think that I'm following the rules as they're laid out. So I think that that should be considered. That's all. Thanks.
Can you help me? Are you Rondalin? Is that how I pronounce your name?
Rondalyn.
Rondalin. Thank you, Rondalin. Okay. Now, appellant landlord, Steve, you have 5 minutes to rebut any statements made by the respondent. Please limit your comments to rebuttal rather than repeating information already presented.
Thanks. I don't have a lot to say. The way that it's written and the way that the hearing decision decided it is all valid the way it's written. The tenant is absolutely correct. Her rent was $15.45 for 12 months, and that $15.45 was paid. 11 months of it was paid by her. 1 month of it was paid by the landlord. The same way, not in this particular tenant's case, but the same way in other tenants where they paid nothing, and the state of California paid 12 months. So the base rent was charged, was paid, and but with regard to how the decision was made and how it's written, I have no rebuttal with that. It was decided properly the way it was written. It's just, in my opinion, written incorrectly. So I will not continue to repeat things.
Thank you, Steve. And my respondent tenant, you now have 5 minutes to rebut any statements made by the appellant. Similarly, please limit your comments to rebuttal rather than repeating information already presented.
Yep, then I don't really have anything more to say.
Understandable. Thank you. Okay, RHC members, we're going to start with questions for staff, and then we can move to questions for our appellant or respondent. Does anyone have any questions for staff? Committee member Grinwell?
Thank you. This question's for Karen. Could you remind us of the rationale for the 1 year retroactive look back?
So let's be clear, it's not just a limited 1 year retroactive look back, but in order to address some of the concerns that were raised by landlords about the impact of these regulations, which clarify what was already in the law, you did adopt a regulation that limited the amount of a rent credit that a tenant could get related to concessions to a 1 year look back prior to September 1st, 2022. So that was an effort to address concerns that there may have been misunderstandings about how the CSFRA treats base rent, and to address the landlord community concerns about concessions that may have been given years ago. So.
But to the appellant's question, was it discussed? Was it agreed? I actually can't recall. Was it agreed to in the meeting, or was this language that staff drafted and then was accepted upon, like, in the consent calendar?
No, this was discussed in the meeting. So at your July 18th meeting, we presented to you the amendment to Chapter 2 with the definition of base rent, which discusses some of this. And then we also had an amendment to chapter 4, which addresses the look back period. So this was a follow-up to your June meeting to try to address some of the concerns that were raised in the June meeting. So it was discussed at your meeting.
Thank you. And did the committee consider a 0 day? Was the 1 year look back like it? Oh, sorry, I see other hands. I will.
Yeah, I'm not sure I remember the full discussion. I think the choice for the committee was between no relief for property owners, meaning that a tenant that may have gotten a concession in 2018 could have come in and gotten a rent rebate for the last 4 years, versus what we put in the regulations, which was the 1 year limitation on getting a rollback. So.
Got it. And I just bring it up because the appellant was mentioning that it didn't seem like that's something that we debated, but
I remember it was specifically asked for by the landlords in one of their meetings to diminish the impacts on them.
Right.
I would assume they would have asked for 0.
Well, ultimately, I guess this was the compromise that the rental housing committee agreed upon.
And I'm just trying to clarify, it was a compromise the rental housing committee decided on, or it was like staff came back with a recommendation and then that was in the consent calendar.
It was
never on the consent calendar.
It was not on consent. This
Okay,
was discussed for over an hour at your July meeting.
Specifically the rollback period, what the rollback period is going to be.
Yep.
Yes.
Specifically the regulations that were adopted at that evening, which included the definitions and the rollback period, was discussed pretty extensively. And this was either the 3rd or 4th meeting at which we had discussed the concessions issue.
Yeah, I was going to add that this was one of the basis of a straw poll that was taken of the rental housing committee at a prior meeting to provide staff with guidance in drafting the regulations for the July meeting.
Got it. Okay. Thank you very much.
Vice Chair Ramos, you have a question?
Oh, no, I was just clarifying committee member Grunwald's question, considering I think I was one of the swing votes that determined that we would have a 1 year look back instead of having it go all the way back, because we wanted to not, we didn't want, I was convinced that we didn't want to be too harsh. And so this was something that was in the favor of landlords that we voted on. So otherwise it would have gone all the way back to the start of the rollback of October 19th, 2015, which was the base date of our base of rent. So I don't think the 0 date was not an option in that meeting. It was that or something far back more.
Vice Chair Ramos? One question I had, and this may be Karen, Naz, Anki, I'm not sure who it's for, but if I recall the timeline on this properly, the July meeting was done as a response to something at the very end of the June meeting, where one of the favorable votes for the clarification that was done in June after 2 or 3 other meetings, including some focus groups. And it was, the July meeting scope was fairly narrow because it was really the clarification. So if we're looking to the records, and somebody correct me if I'm wrong, I believe if we're looking to the records, we would be looking to the body of records starting on or around March of 2020. Not necessarily just at July. Is that accurate?
Yes, and I think the original decisions by the rental housing did not exclude the first month's rent, but at the end of the meeting, it became clear that that might have been a viable option. And then we were asked to bring that back in the July meeting to amend that certain part of the regulations that were already adopted in the June meeting.
Thank you. And I believe that previous to that, the tenor of the conversation was that because of how the definition of base rent was written in the CSFRA, we didn't have a lot of flexibility here, and we were concerned we maybe had no flexibility, and that the CSFRA itself, when implemented in October of 2015, had inadvertently or meaningfully, you can debate whether it was intentional or unintentional, actually basically done away with concessions, and it was just not an issue that had bubbled up. Is that sort of correct on how the body of evidence worked there? Monkey's nodding her head, so I think, yeah, okay. Do we have any other questions for staff or for our appellant landlord or our respondent tenant? Okay. I am seeing none. So the RHC will now deliberate. It would be appropriate at this time to entertain a motion to adopt the tentative decision, after which such motion can be discussed by the RHC. And I see a hand from committee member Collins, who is on mute.
You're on mute.
I'm not being good about that. Okay, I would like to suggest a motion to accept the tentative agreement. I don't know if I have the language correctly, but I'd like to propose that motion.
Excellent. I will second that motion.
All right, we'll go ahead with the roll call. And we'll start with committee member Grunwald.
I will vote aye, but I guess when would be a good time to give comment, Chair?
We can do comments before we do the vote if there's comments.
Sure.
I don't want to vote before deliberation.
So it's okay to do it now. Okay.
Let's do it now.
Yeah, I mean,
let's
I think this
postpone the
is
vote for comments then.
okay. I just wanted to say that I do this is how we knew this was going to turn out, right? That if I were a tenant and there is money that I'm technically owed as part of the new rule, I would pursue that, and I think no one is going to hold that against any tenant. I think it's being framed. Our decision is being framed as, well, it's better than going back forever, right? It's only a year, but to the appellant's point, that does resonate with me. That it's retroactive. I think we keep saying that like it should have been clear from the CSFRA that this type of concession, everyone should have known what the base rent was. But even us as a committee, when we were debating the options, we went from almost saying any month's concession is going to be included as opposed to the 1 month. That was like a last minute change, right? So I think framing it as like landlords are lucky that they only have to roll it back a year is that would be frustrating for me. I think I do not own property or a rental in Mountain View, so that doesn't affect me personally. But I feel for the appellant's point, and I think we were talking about that in deliberation. I think that this is going to happen much more often. And it doesn't, I can see how some people might not think it feels right. So I'll leave that as my comment, but the law is clear, what's in the law is clear. So I think our only course of action right now is to accept, but I think in future regulations, I think we should consider that.
New committee member Grunwald, I do want to point out, I don't want anyone to get the impression that I'm saying, or I don't feel that the committee is saying that landlords are quote unquote lucky that they got 1 month. I think what came about in or around March of 2022 is that in examining some of the language in the CSFRA, whether it was intentional by the drafters or unintentional by the drafters, the way that base rent was written had incompatibility with the idea of a concession as a whole. And so I do think that the RHC did what it could within the confines of we cannot change the CSFRA. The CSFRA would have to go to the voters to be changed, to see how we might be able to navigate within that framework to accommodate in some way, shape, or form what we know may have been happening from 2015 onward, and to hopefully give some relief. I think there was a lot of concern that we would have 4, 6, 7 years of rent rollbacks that would be just completely devastating to our landlord population in terms of the financial impact. And we were trying to mitigate that to best we could. I don't want anyone to feel like we're being as glib as to say, oh, you're quote unquote lucky to have gotten this. I think we were trying to do the best with what we were given. And I don't know, I didn't draft the CSRFRA, but I don't know if it was intentional or not that perhaps concessions were not really spoken to there. But I do think that what we heard consistently in the earlier meetings, it wasn't in the July meeting because we had had a lot of discussion on this at that point, was that if we did nothing, the petitions would still be brought because they were still petitions that could be brought, and that it was likely the hearing officers would decide to go back far more than 1 year. And so that was something we were trying to control for. So I just wanted to mention that. And Vice Chair Ramos, I saw your hand next. You're
Lots
on
of
mute as
feelings.
well.
I personally, we could have bypassed a lot of this by not having a 3-month rent. And I know I was the one that brought that back, and that's on me. So we were trying to be accommodating, and we're hearing the argument that's not accommodating enough, and that is frustrating to me. So it gives me a lot of perspective in future votes, but that is why we are doing our best with trying to ensure that everything is above board and fair to everyone. This seems pretty straightforward. It's unfortunate that for some reason they picked the second month. I'm not entirely sure why. But the whole thing about the 1 month free rent was because we were trying to accommodate the property owners, and we were trying, the whole thing about the 1 year was because we were trying to accommodate the property owners. And that was the reason why there's confusion. And so it's frustrating to me to hear that. So that's all my comment on that.
Thank you, Vice Chair Ramos. Committee Member Rosa.
So I want to thank all of you for giving me the space to speak, and I hope I won't sound too harsh, but somebody who's recently have gone through COVID, and how me being boosted and everything, I still had a really hard time with it, to the point that I had thoughts that maybe I wasn't going to make it. And to hear comments that people were getting a free ride, I think it's just uncalled for, because I don't think that being in the pandemic was something that any of us ever, first of all, expected to, or ever wanted to be, or ever wanted to be laid off because of it, or be sick because of it. And then as I was going through, and after 2 years, I've never have had COVID, and just recently have had it. To me, it's like, oh my God, COVID is still alive and well. But then if I would have been with the sickness and with being so scared of being kicked out of my apartment or my living place because I didn't have a job, because I was sick, because there was no way of me to survive, it would have been devastating for me and my family. And people have had thoughts of, because of going through the pandemic, of suicide, you know? And thank God that we had these safety nets, because none of that happened. Our country's in a better place. I mean, if we wouldn't have had the safety nets that we did, our country would be in a huge, I mean, we may end up being in a recession, but at least during that time, it would have been, there wouldn't have been money for rent, food. People would have, I don't even want to think about it. So I just want to say that I think, one, nobody got a free ride, because the tenants were in jeopardy of their credit being devastated. If they didn't pay for this, they would have been kicked out, they would have been homeless. And secondly, they would have had a $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 debt. And landlords got most of that money back, I think, if not all of it. So I think that we should not use the pandemic as an excuse to say that somebody's getting a free ride, or that it's, because I'm going to say something. I'm grateful that we had those safety nets. I am so grateful. Having gone through COVID, one, feeling how painful it was, and secondly, where our country would be if we didn't have those safety nets. So that's my comment. I hope I don't sound too harsh, but I do want to I want to end up in a good note where let's be grateful that we had those, and hopefully we'll never be in that situation ever again, because I don't think any of us would want to be there again. Thank you all, and sorry for taking so much time for my comment.
Thank you, Committee Member Rosas. Committee Member Greenwald.
Yeah, I mean, just to make sure I don't misconstrue any of my comment, I don't think the appellant or myself is saying that anyone got a free ride. I think there are incentives now that if you can technically prove that you got a concession for a certain period of time, you will get a rollback, and you are owed that, and that is what we as a committee came up with. I just wanted to acknowledge what the appellant is saying, which is that actually, to Vice Chair Ramos, I think you made the right call. I think by the second month is a good compromise. Saying that the first month is very common, but the second month, that's getting too far. I think I agreed with you in the debate. It's only the retroactive nature of this, in that for us it's frustrating just for us to say you should have known, because it took us 4 meetings or something to discuss this. And when we say also, to the chair, I think you're framing it as we got legal advice that it may not have been tenable or able to go at a 0 day, but also I think that's up for interpretation. That is a legal interpretation. We won't know whether we would have been sued or something for going with a 0 day. So, I think just in future comment, I think we should say what we believe is fair. To the appellant's point, right? This is something that if you polled 50 community members specifically about the rollback period and the retroactivity of it, and that they should have known when they were giving a concession that this is going to happen, I think on its face, I don't think the majority of people in Mountain View would say, that they should have known at that time, when that lease was signed and they were giving 2 months free, that would all be recollected to a year, because a year is somewhat arbitrary too, I would say, right? Like that, the legal footing for a year versus full back, again, we have the power as a committee to interpret what's fair, and this is something that I do acknowledge that it doesn't seem fair, but the committee came to a compromise. The committee made a decision. We're all willing to accept that, but again, in the future, it's tough to follow the law if you don't really know the law. I mean, that's really what this feeling comes to. And I agree with the point that the second month free is like, anybody who does that after September 1st, now they know. I mean, they need to follow that law. So I'll leave it there. This is not a policy debate. It is just one appeal. So I think we have an answer for our appeal probably, but yeah, I wanted to acknowledge that. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Grunwald. Committee Member Almond.
First, I wanted to thank Committee Member Rosas for bringing it back to the reality of what a lot of people go through, whether there's a pandemic or not. We're supposedly all one paycheck away from homelessness. And the other thing is that I wanted to step back a bit. I think that this is a test case in a way. When I read it, I thought we could have expected something like this would come down after we made our decisions. I think that what the appellant, the landlord, is saying, well, we didn't know this. Well, now we've made it clear, and hopefully the word will get out that we've set parameters. There is a specific framework. There's 1 month concession. There's 1 year that's reflected in that. And so that in the future, hopefully people won't say, well, you didn't tell us. We didn't know this, or we would have done this differently or something like that. And I think that this is a very clear decision. I think staff is correct in recommending that we approve the temporary, the tentative agreement. Yeah. So I'm content with moving forward with my motion.
Committee Member Almond. Okay. Oh, it says my internet connection is unstable. Can you all still hear me? Excellent. Okay. So I think with that, we can now proceed to the roll call vote. Andrea, will you help us out with that?
Perfect. All right. So we'll go ahead and start with Committee Member Grunwald.
And the motion was to accept the tentative agreement or tentative decision. Then aye.
Committee Member Almond.
Aye.
Committee Member Rosas.
Yes.
Vice Chair Ramos.
Yes.
Chair Haynes Livesay.
Aye.
Motion passes unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Now we will move on to agenda item 7.1, the monthly status report for October 2022. We will begin with a presentation from staff.
Good evening. Thank you, Chair. This presentation, item 7.1, is the monthly status report for the month of October. We'll do a very high-level review of this since we are reporting more details on the quarterly, which will be given in the end of the January meeting. We had 782 inquiries made through the end of October, and 25% of which are bilingual services for with Spanish as the primary language. We've held 10 workshops with 56 attendees and had 17 office hours. We've held 24 pop-ups and eviction help center clinics with 1,065 people being connected within the community. And we'll pull these numbers out a little bit more so that you can see what the actual eviction help center numbers are versus the community outreach that we're doing on a regular basis now. For our termination notices, we've sent out 354 targeted letters to tenants who have received termination notices, letting them know about the Housing and Eviction Help Center and other services available to them. And we've sent out 22 email updates. There's been 45 mediations and conciliations through the Mountain View Rental Housing Helpline and the Mountain View Mediation Program, 28 of which have been resolved and 16 are pending, with only 1 unresolved this fiscal year. We've had 139 bank rent increase notices and a total of 370 termination notices. You can see those details here. And 3 households have received assistance through the calendar year for tenant relocation assistance. We've had 12 tenant petitions right now, no landlord petitions and no exemption petitions. We will be fully implementing and rolling out the capital improvement petitions and the joint petitions, starting either in January or beginning on in December 1st. It depends on staff's capacity. As you can see, the market is still, in recovery mode. We are at 4.8% for vacancy rates this month. The market is a little bit unstable right now throughout the Bay Area, and we're seeing that reflected in these numbers. And rent hit a peak and is now dropping in Mountain View as well, just as it is being reflected across all areas in the Bay Area. So we're at $2,668 for the average asking rent. And we've had 4 properties go on the market for a total of 58 units, and 20 units have sold, with a total of 2 properties since the start of the fiscal year. And this concludes staff's presentation on the monthly status report. Are there any questions?
Any questions, committee? Committee member Ross?
So we have an idea if these properties that were sold, were they like mom and pop landlords owned, or was this like a big building or a big multi apartment?
I'd have to go and double check the data, but from what we can tell here, there's 2 properties that sold for 20 units total, which would indicate that, it's a building size of about 10 units. So.
Okay. Where do you, I'm sorry, where do you see that? My glass is not working for me?
So 2 properties here.
Okay.
Sold
Uh-huh.
for a total of 20 units.
Oh, thank you. The numbers are so small then. I guess my glasses are not working. Thank you so much.
Of course, anytime.
Any other questions? Okay, since there are no more questions, I will now invite the public comments. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on the status report item? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Okay, seeing no hands, we will now go into committee deliberations and provide any feedback. There is no motion required on this item. Does the committee have any feedback or any deliberations they would like to provide on this report? Committee member Grinmore.
Last I heard, I think we were going to revise the status report, or was coming out. Changes were coming. I guess is that. Yeah. When can we look forward to that?
Changes are coming. They'll be rolled out in the January, so the next quarter update. And we'll be reviewing some of those in the communications plan update that's coming up.
Cool. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other feedback, comments, questions? Okie dokie. Well, that was a great lead in. We will now move to agenda item 7.2, the Community Outreach and Fiscal Year 2022-23 Communications Plan Overview. We will begin with a presentation from staff.
Thank you, Chair Haynes Livesay. I appreciate the introduction, and thank you, committee members, for the opportunity to present this item. Item 7.2 is the Community Outreach and Fiscal Year 2022-23 Communications Plan Overview. And the purpose of this presentation is for the Rental Housing Committee to receive an overview of the community outreach and education efforts for the rent stabilization program, and for you to provide feedback. In October of 2020, staff briefed the RHC on the rent stabilizations program's outreach to educate and inform the community about the Community Stabilization and Fair Rent Act and COVID-19 emergency eviction protections. I apologize for the typo there. The briefing included an overview of completed outreach efforts and provided a roadmap of activities to be implemented during fiscal year 2020-21. There were significant external impacts on our outreach and education efforts, including the COVID-19 pandemic, which significantly transformed outreach efforts to focus on COVID-19 emergency eviction protections from March 2020 through the end of the last fiscal year, 2021-22. In that time period, the Mobile Home Rent Stabilization Ordinance was adopted by City Council, and the Rental Housing Committee was tasked with implementation of that ordinance in October 2021. Staff also began administering that program and performing outreach for that program starting in November of 2021. There had been additional outreach done for that program in the past as well, but it started picking up once the program was formally implemented after the adoption of the ordinance by City Council. So just wanted to talk a little bit about the importance of effective outreach and education for this program. The ability for community members to access protections available under the CSFRA and the MHRSO, and for landlords and park owners to know their rights, responsibilities, and how to comply with the requirements of the laws are dependent upon the community's knowledge of the laws. Effective communications and outreach are vital in ensuring rights and responsibilities are understood, implemented, and accessed accordingly by every community member that is affected by the law, which includes landlords, mobile home park owners, and of course, tenants. The intent of our outreach is to maximize the understanding of complex laws in as clear of language as possible. Materials and outreach methods are routinely assessed to increase engagement, improve accessibility, and increase language access. Throughout fiscal year 2021 and 2021-22, staff implemented a multimodal outreach strategy that fostered public engagement through the creation of unique community outreach experiences, virtually deployed customer service satisfaction surveys, broadened multilingual resources, including web pages, webinars, and materials. We also released phase 3 of the Rent Registry online platform for tenant petitions. We expanded the landlord rent registry, and we developed and started to implement mobile home rent stabilization outreach. We also brought the Mountain View Housing Helpline in-house. It had been previously administered on behalf of the city by Project Sentinel, and we provided extensive COVID-19 emergency eviction protections outreach, which is what I'm going to highlight this evening. As I mentioned, COVID-19 significantly impacted our focus and our strategies. We pivoted toward focusing heavily on reducing evictions related to COVID-19 financial distress, which supports one of the main goals of the rent stabilization program, the CSFRA, and the MHRSO, which is to support and improve community stability by reducing rental housing turnover. We implemented this multi-pronged outreach strategy through a lot of heavy work with creating materials, events, and workshops that focused on what people could do and what people could access and how people could access rent relief provided by the city and by the state, as well as targeting the landlord community extensively as well, so that they would know what was allowed under the law regarding eviction protections, evictions, and rent relief. We did this through partnering with multiple community and grassroots organizations. Some of the highlights, I'm going to just review some of the highlights. We obviously did a lot more than this, and you can review some of the work done in fiscal year 2021-22 on attachment 3, which is the infographic for the fiscal year for the eviction prevention program. So we held eviction help center clinics, which were started in response to overwhelming community need and under the direction of the RHC with the support of the City Council. We opened the Eviction Help Center, which is now the Housing and Eviction Help Center We held 61 clinics from August 14th of 2021 through June 30th of 2022, reaching 832 total clients for a 343 individual tenant households. And those individual tenant households there that you see represent about 40 to 45% of the total number of households that applied for relief through the state's rent relief program for the city of Mountain View. So we were able to assist quite a few households. We had a lot of people coming through the center for that. And we're very grateful that we had that opportunity to assist so many people in that way. We held 18 pop-up events and connected with at least 830 community members. These pop-up events helped us establish further connections with the community and reach residents who might be unable to or prefer not to attend formal outreach events like workshops. And it also helped us continue to be seen as a trusted source of information. This may be why we've seen inquiries increase and petitions increase in the past few months. So highlights included the City of Mountain View's Monster Bash, where we were able to connect with 100 community members, attendance at Cafecito events held by the Mountain View Los Altos School District, where we connected with 36 community members. We've attended multiple food distribution events through CSA, and we're able to connect with 255 community members. We reached 50 community members by going to the multicultural festival put on by the city. And then we held our first annual summer kickoff with CHOC and other community organizations, where we reached 210 community members, where 210 community members actually participated and received materials about all of the different programs that our community partners and our office put on. And also it was just a really fun time. So we had a good experience with that, and something that we'll continue to do in the future. For workshops and trainings, we held 25 virtual webinars, trainings and community members, reaching a total of 157 community members, with 12 of those webinars being held in English and Spanish. We also mailed informational packets to tenants and landlords immediately after landlords filed termination notices with the city. And the packets included a courtesy letter, a housing and eviction help center flyer, and eviction prevention information sheet. We're still continuing to do this. Last year, we sent out 943 targeted informational packets. And we also sent out 3 postcards to provide updates about the statewide eviction moratorium, rent relief, and eviction protections to all 36,000 households in Mountain View, as well as 655 landlords. We did that because we were trying to reach as many landlords as possible, as well as tenants who were in single family homes or duplexes that are not covered by the CSFRA. And we're still able to receive state rent relief if they were renting a house. So that concludes our overview of what we did in the past 2 years. And now I'm going to go ahead and talk about what we're planning for the next year and probably the year after that. So we have a goal for our communications plan to increase community awareness and understanding of the tenant protections in Mountain View, with 3 main objectives. The first objective is to develop consistent materials that clearly communicate tenant protections, programs, and services. And we have 3 main strategies to do that, which is the first one, to design and distribute materials to inform the public of the tenant and landlord rights and responsibilities under our local law. The second is to redesign the website to improve navigation and functionality. The third is to continue to refine and implement mobile home rent stabilization outreach. The second objective is to increase engagement to better inform the community. Strategies include providing multiple methods for responding to questions and concerns from and providing information to community members, delivering presentations, workshops, and community meetings, engaging vulnerable and hard to reach community members, utilizing multiple modes of communication, and fostering relationships with community partners. And then the third objective is to improve program efficacy, efficiency, and compliance to increase transparency and foster trust. And we're talking about here When we say improving program, we mean the outreach program specifically. So we're focusing on communicating updates and major changes to affected parties and evaluating outreach and communication program outcomes. And I'm going to go over a high-level summary of some of the major tasks. This is not all of them, but I did want to give you some idea on what we'll be focusing on this year. So we are updating materials and creating materials, including flyers, brochures, and reports, like the monthly status report, as needed to clearly communicate tenant protections, programs, and services. For the monthly status report, staff proposes adding the following data points based on RHC feedback, as well as presenting the reports quarterly while continuing to compile data on a monthly basis. For those new data points, we're looking at registration and fee compliance data, including highlighting the percentage of units registered and the percentage of properties paid, average market rent and vacancy rates per unit for fully covered units based on unit size, including studios, 1 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, and 3+ bedrooms. Anything more detailed than that, over three bedrooms, the data is inconsistent at best. We'll also be showing annual termination data for CSFRA covered units since the start of the CSA and a quarterly look back for the current year. We'll cover mobile home data, including petitions. We'll have the Housing and Eviction Help Center data, which is currently in a separate infographic that will be combined into the monthly status report. And we'll also show public inquiries over time so that you can see the changes. There will be a spike for the COVID-19 related years. We will also expand our distributed targeted mailings. We'll have banked rent increase follow-up packets sent to tenants. The termination notice follow-up packets will continue to be sent to tenants with a copy to the landlord as it currently is. We'll also be sending out new property owner packets. So when we notice that a property transacts and changes hands, we want to make sure that those new property owners are aware of the CSFRA and the MHRSO, if that's relevant, and provide them with that information as quickly as possible. We have seen some properties that have transacted and the new property owners are not aware of the law. So we want to step in and provide that initial support as early as possible. We'll also be sending out registration survey packets to small property landlords with 5 or fewer units. So this is going to be a hard copy of the registration portal. We already have this in existence. And Andrea and the rest of the staff provide incredible support to help people who have a hard time with filling out the portal online with this, if it's requested. And after speaking with other jurisdictions, we thought that it might be beneficial to our smaller property landlords to receive this as an actual form that they can fill out and just send right back to us. And then we can input the information in for them if they so choose. This is something that other jurisdictions have done to increase compliance with their registration. And we're specifically thinking of this because we know that we have a lot of smaller properties that have elderly owners who may not feel as comfortable using the portal as some of the larger properties do. And then we'll be sending out those compliance letters for properties that are potentially out of compliance with the CSFRA or the MHRSO, first to the landlords, and then the follow-up letters to landlords and tenants as approved by the committee. We'll be conducting targeted outreach to landlords, including outreach specific to registration requirements, program updates, noticing requirements, and compliance requirements. We have a newsletter going out this week, actually, and that will be going out to tenants. It will be going out to landlords, 2 separate letters for the CSFRA, and then also to mobile home park residents and to mobile home park park owners and landlords. And then we did want to highlight some of our portal updates. The bulk upload function that has been requested will be likely available by mid to late December. The software company, 3DI, is currently programming that feature for the open annual registration period. But we do want to note that once an owner submits their annual registration updates, the system will remove the option so that we can more closely track the changes. We'll also be updating the database before the next open registration period starts to address the issue related to partially covered units. They will only now need to update the owner and manager contact information and not the unit rent information. The public search option will be released and live by December 1st of this year, so coming right up. Landlord petitions will be able to be filed for MNOI petitions by mid-January, and there will be a simplified unit amendment process, which will be released mid to late January. So those are all of those updates coming our way, among other ones, but we did want to highlight those. We will continue to engage vulnerable and hard to reach community members in a variety of ways. And we're also expanding that. These are some things that we've had on our plan for quite a while, but haven't been able to implement because of the effects of the pandemic. So we will continue to expand translated materials and web pages as we go into updating the website. We will start having web pages related to the rent stabilization program specifically in other languages like we do for the eviction support. We'll be distributing materials within the community at high-touch locations like laundromats and grocery stores. We'll be connecting with the Chinese speaking community via the Multicultural Engagement Program and its known community members to perform targeted outreach to better inform the community about applicable laws. And we'll be developing realtor-specific training and materials so that we can start addressing the issue of property owners perhaps not knowing about the CSFRA when they purchase the building. Other jurisdictions do this, and it's been very effective. And we've been looking into this for the past 2 years and haven't had the chance to implement it yet. So we're looking forward to that. We'll also be completing the redesign of the website to help communicate important information more clearly. This is in line with the city's larger project for the overall website redesign. We'll be continuing to refine and implement the mobile home rent stabilization program outreach, be developing and executing a petition process, communications plan for capital improvement and joint petitions. We'll be completing and releasing phase 4 of the rent registry online platform to allow landlord petitions to be filed online. I mentioned that already, but I did want to highlight it here. And then we'll be evaluating outreach and education program outcomes, including assessing fee payment and registration before and after outreach and compliance enforcement, and comparatively analyzing the monthly status reports, housing and eviction help center data, and customer satisfaction surveys. We anticipate that this broad multimodal approach will continue to increase the community's understanding of the CSFRA and MHRSO, additional city programs, and other related emergency communications if necessary. And we're anticipating that this will continue to foster understanding of the various programs and resources available to community members in Mountain View. And this concludes staff's presentation for this item, and I'm happy to take any questions at this time.
Committee Member Allman, you have a question.
I don't have a question. I just am blown away by the amount of both depth and breadth of the work that is being done. As far as I'm concerned, you need an army of people to execute all of this. And having done a lot of similar programming in my own career, I know how important it is to look forward and look back and see what's working and what's not. And it's very clear that you are very receptive to the community needs, both from landlords and tenants, and that the materials are going out on a timely basis. I just can't thank the staff enough. It's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Committee Member Allman. I would agree with your comments there. Does anybody have any other questions? Oh, Committee Member Grimwald.
Sure. And I guess when would we, is it the same budget for this plan? Or is that something that we address later?
The same budget that you approved in the spring.
So all this and all, like, does this all fall under just like that line item, the same line item as before?
That's correct.
All right, thank you.
Committee member Almond.
I had one other question. The newsletters, would it be possible for those to be sent to the committee as well? I'd be fascinated to see what's in the newsletter. I'm all for newsletters.
I'll definitely send them online when we're done with the meeting, and then we can also get copies sent to you too.
That's great. Thank you.
You're not a committee member, but you have your hand up.
I just wanted to add to the budget question that we also received ARPA funds from City Council that will be used in the majority to address the multicultural and language aspects of this program. And these ARPA funds are not necessarily guaranteed in forthcoming years. So in the coming budget discussions for next year, we will probably bring this item back to the Rental Housing Committee.
Thank you, Anki, for that clarification. Committee member Grunwald.
Yeah, and thanks, Anki, for that. The question, my question, I guess, is first, I'd agree. I mean, this looks like a great plan, and I think every year we are able to do more on this side. But we have mentioned, or we've, I guess, the conversation would become more difficult if we thought we need to add staff to like make this happen, right? So if this is at current staffing levels, that makes then it's all great. I think like hard conversations would need to happen if your staff's getting overwhelmed by all of the activity. And I think in the past, I did see in your plan, more efficiency. In the past, we've mentioned, more of the targeted comms, like, okay, you have a new landlord or you have a new tenant, and here's a packet, or a tenant that is in an eviction situation, and sending them a packet. I think those are amazing ideas. But like the blanket mailers, right? Like maybe we talked about reducing the number of the frequency with which those are sent out, right? Like we have, I guess also I'd say, measurement, right? So if we have these goals, that the objectives that you laid out, is there a mechanism by which we might be able to measure whether we've reached those goals, like whether awareness is, I mean, I'm very surprised by what you mentioned about some landlords, some new building owners not aware of the law. They would be highly incentivized to know that. They would have likely paid a different price for the building if they really didn't know that it was under rent control. So it's a pretty big deal for them. And so that's a sign that, maybe awareness is not what it should be, but it'd be great if we were able to measure, or at least have a goal of, hey, we've touched every tenant at some point with some sort of mailer, or gotten them on the on a list. And even at some point, to save paper, right? I mean, if we can have folks opting into email only, right, after their first couple mailers, I'm sure these are things that are part of the plan for efficiency. But will we get, my final question, I guess, will we get another level deeper dive of this plan, or is this the deep dive for now?
This is the deep dive for now. As you can see here, we are starting to build out some of those evaluation and metrics, and we'll continue to do that as we move forward with this. That's been something that we've been wanting to do for quite a while, and just that is a bandwidth and capacity issue. To address some of your other questions, Committee Member Grunwald, one of them had to do with the budget and additional staffing. As Anki mentioned, we have the ARPA funds for some of our translations and interpretation support that we're receiving for the Housing and Eviction Help Center. But otherwise, for our actual permanent staff, everything has been budgeted and allocated for that, and takes into account this plan takes into account those current staffing levels. If there is a potentiality that because of increased communications and increased understanding that things like petitions on either the tenant or the landlord side could be increased, that may, this always impacts workload, right? So it's not just the potentiality of staff being impacted by having an outreach plan that is significant and deep, but it's also, if it's effective, we should see those numbers increasing, right? We should see petitions increasing because more people are aware that they have the opportunity on either the landlord side or the tenant side to file petitions. They're more aware of the fact that on the property owner side that there are capital improvement petitions that are available to them. They're more aware that there are joint petitions available to them. So some of the metrics that we should see increasing are actually things that will potentially impact staff workload, other than just this being a broad and deep communications plan. We do have one position that is not fully filled at this time for an outreach specialist / office assistant to be the next piece of this puzzle. So once that person is online, we will have greater bandwidth as well. Right now, we have someone who works 20 hours a week as an hourly employee, and while we're trying to fill that position. So hopefully we will have more of a capacity once that person comes online full-time. We should, which will be nice, and it's not an impact to our budget because it's already budgeted. That position is already budgeted for our current budget.
Yeah, thank you very much. Were there the incremental I was trying to get more at the incremental costs of like printing mailers and things like that. Is that, but maybe that line item isn't significant. I guess everything that we do that falls under outreach, what is the total annual for like the
I have
printing
to go
costs or
back
any of
and
that?
double check that. I mean, it's not highly significant. Obviously, when we're actually able to print, twice a year for our newsletters, which is something that we do see a significant increase in activity around. Very effective communications are the printed newsletters. Those costs do go out. I think it's about, I haven't received the invoice for this current one, but in the past it's been around $10,000 to send those printed mailers to every covered tenant and landlord in the city. So it's not as significant as one might anticipate that the financial impacts are.
Okay.
And
thank you.
we found, one of the issues I know and I understand wanting to go digital. That's something that everyone is interested in. However, for our more vulnerable community members, which we don't have a way to know who is a vulnerable community member, either a vulnerable landlord or a vulnerable tenant. We don't have there's no way to know that. We do know that the mailings reach people that the emailing and online aspects do not. We saw that throughout the pandemic. We had our own hypothesis that it was, more accessible to have things going out in print publication, and that was confirmed. So that is something to keep in mind, that we do have that information. We do have that data. We know that for sure. So.
Okay. Yeah, if there's a way to tie the measurement to that, so to see what you're seeing, right? It'd be great. I actually I don't remember when the mailers go out, and also a lot of the data that we have for call volume is cumulative throughout the year. So I mean, if there's a way to see that month over month, that'd be great, right? You can say the mailer is November and here's an increase in calls. And more to just make sure we're effective. I mean, I think not to really nickel and dime the budget, but you know, to every once in a while test how many the universal mailer, how many of those should go out, because that $10,000 is still, yeah, sorry.
Can I have clarification on when you say universal mailer, what you're specifically referring to?
Sorry, the mailings that go to every covered unit.
Like the newsletter, for instance.
I receive like half-page cards.
The postcards.
Postcards, yeah. Do those go out to every? And sorry, maybe I just need to be educated on all the mailers, the different mailers that go out. But do the postcards go out?
It depends on
multiple
the
times a
postcard.
year.
It depends on the postcard. So during the COVID-19 pandemic outreach, we were under direction from the city manager's office and city council to send out specific postcards related to the eviction moratorium and related to eviction protections. So those were going out much more frequently than what our program does. We do send out ones related to the AGA, which is very important information. We send out ones to landlords. They're relatively low cost. I can pull those numbers for you if you're interested in knowing what the cost of the postcards are specifically. And they're a easy way. We have people put them on their refrigerators and come to us and say, hey, I'm at this workshop because I have this postcard. So we have sent them out for workshops, which we'll probably continue to do every other quarter. So we'll have the newsletter be one place where people learn about workshops, and then the postcard supplement that on the quarterly. So we'll do newsletter, workshop postcard, newsletter, workshop postcard, so that it's not major mailings going out really frequently. So we have refined that. They're not every month, although that was effective at one point. So we'll continue to, look at that and see what works and what doesn't work. But those are our basic ones: the rent registry postcard, the AGA postcard, and then twice a year the workshop postcard, and twice a year the newsletter once we're back on that cycle.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in at some point if you could bring back just the calendar and total cost, just because like if we're trying to keep the what we charge landlords to be consistent year over year or similar, that could be a place that if we don't see effectiveness for a couple of those mailers, maybe that it only takes a few $1,000s to reduce the rental fee by $1 per year. But again, this is a smaller issue. So I'll leave it there. Thank you for all your answers and for all your hard work on this. The only other point, you did mention like MNOI petitions or seeing petition activity. And I think, from other jurisdictions, we see MNOI petitions decrease over time as you get further and further away from the base year. But I would expect that once we get the capital improvement petition, it's kind of sorted out and advertise that we could see an increase in that from making landlords more aware of it. And then tenant petitions, yeah, I mean, I think that would also track against awareness as well. So I think that's a good measure. Although, thank you for your time. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Committee Member Greenwald and Committee Member Rosas.
Thank you, Chair. I was just wanted to give a testament to, because I actually have been in meetings where our staff has definitely been participant, where they have presented the RHC in a very, very good light, and have definitely informed the community. So I wanted to bring that up, and it is translated into the language where the community is most prevalent on. So I want to thank him for that, because I know that's especially certain meetings, they go way over. Sometimes they're there till 10 o'clock at night, and the staff is there. So I wanna thank them for that. And I am really, really happy to hear that you guys are reaching out to the Chinese American community that we have in our city. So I just wanna I want to mirror what Chair I'm sorry, not Chair, Committee Member Almond said about our staff that definitely have very knowledgeable, and oh my God, all the community events that you attend. I know those are hard sometimes because to get, although some of them you've been just participant, but also I know you've definitely organized from the onset. So it does take a lot of time and commitment and hard work. Thank you. I was looking for that word. Hard work that you guys do put into these events, and our committee, our role is educating the community. I think it is happening. I've been hearing it. So wanted to say that. And although mailers are not optimal, I do believe that they do possess a goal, which is basically notifying people that there's going to be an event. Because I believe the events are where you really have the opportunity to teach and let people know what's going on. But I also want to thank you and be thoughtful about when these meetings go way late. Please make sure to that there's a some type of remedy where if you have to stay till 10 o'clock at night, then the next day you don't have to be in the office at 10 o'clock in the morning, because that's not sustainable and that's not good. We want our professionals to stay in our city, because I see that you are doing a phenomenal job. So thank you so much. That was all.
To Committee Member Rose. Okay, seeing no more questions for staff, we will now go to the public comment. Would any member of the public on the line like to provide comment on the communications plan? If so, please click the raise hand button in Zoom or press *9 on your phone. Staff will display a countdown timer on the screen. Okay. Next, we will go to committee deliberations and provide feedback. I feel like we did some feedback already, and there is no motion required, but I do want to say I do really like this plan. It looks comprehensive. It looks like a way to build the word out. And the one thing that I do hope that we can do, if it is at all possible, is possibly offering continuing ed credit for the realtors, because while knowing that the property is under rent control should be considered to be a material disclosure, if we have buyers that don't know, and I think we had an appeal, not tonight, but at some point where it was pretty clear that the buyers may not have known what they were getting into when they purchased the property, and it led to an appeal and it sounded like a pretty stressful situation all around. So the more we can do to make sure that our realtor population is educated about what our city has in terms of our rent act and whatnot, I think the better off everybody's going to be, because people will be going in eyes open and everyone will really understand what they're getting involved in. So I'm really pleased we're going to get something up and running to reach out to the realtors as well. And Vice Chair Ramos, you had a comment.
I appreciate staff's work on this. I think this is a great communications plan. Thank you for your work. You are worth every penny. And if you need more pennies, you can always ask for more. I am down for that. I'm so excited because I knew that this was eventually coming up, and I ran into an article, and the title of the article was "To Get More People the Help They Need from Government, Postcards May Be the Answer." And it was a study from UC Berkeley, Harvard, and Stanford that actually studied how outreach was done, and that older, poorer, less educated, and foreign-born populations often do not sign up for the benefits in which they are entitled because they do not know about them, nor do they know about how to access them. And postcards was determined to be the most effective way to reach them. So I'm glad. I was like, we have the data. And like, I knew that this was coming up, and I applaud staff for really doing all they can to make sure that those who need the education about this law are able to get it. Now, it's not going to be perfect. There are so many hard to reach populations. But I'm glad that some of these major tasks are really delving into them. And especially about outreach of those who may be new property owners of CSFRA properties. That is very important. And I do remember that appeal when we were just like, oh man, some people, you didn't really know what you were getting into on this one. So I am very happy with what staff's communication plans, and I'm very happy with how they have proceeded. And if you need any more support, please let us know. Just bring it up. I at least am very happy to oblige, to do whatever it takes to make sure that people understand, know, and are educated about our laws.
Thank you, Vice Chair. Okie dokie. Well, seeing no other comments, questions, etc., I will say thank you to everyone, committee members, staff. We're going to now move to committee and staff announcements and updates, and I will hand it back to staff for some further presentations.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. So I will start off with agenda item 8.1, where we will go over upcoming events and workshops. So of course, we'll start with our Housing and Eviction Help Center. So this is held every first and third Thursday of each month. We have moved to the second floor of the Mountain View Public Library. So we're in the second floor program room for about the second month or so. And we will be there from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. We will actually be there this Thursday, as it is the third Thursday of the month. And so what people can find at the Housing and Eviction Help Center is learning about rent stabilization programs, affordable housing, and connect with different rental assistance programs. We are still helping people check their COVID-19 rent relief statuses. There are a few straggling applications out there. So if anyone needs help with that, they can continue to come visit us at the Help Center. We also help our tenants and landlords learn about eviction help. So we talk to tenants and landlords about our eviction protections, and what to do if they receive an eviction notice, what to do if they're planning to serve an eviction notice. We have on-site legal assistance provided by CLESPA. And we also offer connections with other support services. So things like food distribution, other types of financial assistance, mediation services, and homelessness prevention resources. So I do want to mention that we are in person at the library, but if you cannot make it in person, anyone can join us online during that time at mountainview.gov/eviction help clinic. So we are both in person and online. Right now we'll look at our office hours and workshops. So we continue to hold our virtual office hours every single Tuesday from 10 a.m. to 12 p.m. People can just log on. This is on Zoom at mountainview.gov/RSP office hours. This is for any tenant and any landlord to receive one-on-one help virtually with any tenant landlord issue that they have. We are also having some upcoming workshops. So we will have one this Thursday at the Housing and Eviction Help Center. This will be hybrid, so it will be Zoom and in person. This is at the very end, the last hour of our Housing and Eviction Help Center, so between 4 and 5 o'clock. And we'll be talking about accessibility and accommodations. So people can join there. The link is mountainview.gov/RSP webinars. We will also be having a virtual only mobile home rent stabilization overview workshop Thursday, December 8th at 6:30 p.m. And again, that is on Zoom only. And it is not bilingual, that one. So other events that are coming up, we have our outreach at the school districts. That's every Wednesday. So that will be this Wednesday, the 16th from 2 to 4. So we partner with community organizations who do diaper distributions and such. And we pass out housing and eviction help center flyers and any other relevant flyers for assistance that our community could use. And we also have the outreach for the diaper distribution at Chalk, and that's on November 23rd from 1 to 3, and that's at Rangsdorf Park. And our staff that goes out there is bilingual in both English and Spanish. And to end the meeting on a fun note, we just want to highlight the Dia de Muertos event that staff participated in. This was October 29th, Saturday, October 29th. And this was an event that was held within the larger City of Mountain View's Monster Bash at Rangsdorf Park. And there was a special exhibit for Dia de Muertos in the community center. So as you can see, the middle picture there, that is our staff and our ofrenda. There it is. If you can recognize us with our makeup, maybe, I don't know. But we had a great time connecting with the community. We have our flyers and our brochures here at our table, but we also had them up at the front when people entered, so they could sort of peruse the Mountain View resources and flyers, and we had our outreach material there as well. But we had a great time just connecting with the community and really, getting our faces out there to community members and also the organizations that were participating. So we danced and we sang and we had a great time. So just wanted to sort of show you some highlights of how beautiful that was and that we really enjoyed that event. And that concludes the upcoming events. Any questions?
It's a super fun event.
Yes, it was.
Are there any questions or comments from committee members? I see one from the public. Am I allowed to take any comments from the public at this point, or are we done? Karen, Naz?
Great. Yes, you could take comment from the public. This was an agendized item.
Okay, perfect. I will take public comment then, and I do see a hand. If we could set the timer for the 3 minutes. And if anyone else would like to comment, press *9 on your phone or raise your hand in Zoom. But let's advance B to a speaker role.
Hi, yeah, I'm not going to need 3 minutes. That very last slide, I just had a question about that mobile home workshop, the virtual workshop. Is that for all the parks or, Anki and I have been discussing her roadshow on all 6 parks. So I just wanted a little clarification on that.
Sure, thanks, B. Yeah, this is a precursor to the actually in-person workshops that we will be start holding them starting in the new year. It takes a little time to set that up, but in the meantime, I did not want the people to go without any updates and information. So we start with a virtual one online in the evening and then in the beginning of December, and then we'll start planning the in-person one in each of the mobile homes parks.
Thank you, Anki. Thank you, B. Okay. Are there any additional comments or announcements from committee members or city staff? Great. Seeing none. The meeting is adjourned at 9:01 p.m. The next rental housing committee member is scheduled to be held on Monday, December 5th, 2022 at 7 p.m. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night. Bye.